First, the good news. We won in California. What did we win? Well, Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit against the state of California on behalf of voters who are being harmed by that loony leftist effort in California to require presidential primary candidates to release their tax returns. I think the last 5 years of their tax returns in order to appear on the ballot, which is outside the law, outside the Constitution, and obviously an attack on President Trump. Our lawyers were in Sacramento, California, I think just yesterday, Thursday, arguing on behalf of the voters at a hearing called by the judge. It was a hearing for a preliminary injunction. Of course, President Trump's lawyer was there as well. So you had the lawyers for the state on one side, Judicial Watch's lawyer on the other, sitting next to President Trump's lawyer, lawyers for the California Republican Party, Hamid Dillon, who's another great lawyer and advocate for freedom, and I'm not sure who the fourth lawyer was, but he was there representing additional plaintiffs who are trying to have their rights vindicated by stopping this law. And thankfully, the Judge Englund in the case, from the bench, ruled that yes, we get the preliminary injunction. So President Trump won, Judicial Watch's clients won, and of course you won, the American people, by having California being brushed back from their attempt to put their thumbs on the scale for the 2020 elections. This is a pretty serious affront to the rule of law. Look, I want to quote a critic of the law. Okay, I'm not going to tell you who it is. I'll always try to disguise it in a way to make it fun and interesting, but I probably won't be able to. I'll put on my disguise here. First, it may not be constitutional. This is the law requiring tax returns be made public. First, it may not be constitutional. Second, it sets a slippery slope precedent. Today, we require tax returns, but what would be next? 5 years of health records, a certified birth certificate, high school report cards, and will these requirements vary depending on which political party is in power? A qualified candidate's ability to appear on the ballot is fundamental to our democratic system. For that reason, I hesitate to start down a road that might lead to an ever-escalating set of differing state requirements for presidential candidates. Who said that? The former governor, then governor, of California, Jerry Brown, the Democrat. He vetoed it. They tried to pass this law once before. It was vetoed. The Legislative Council at the time said it would be unconstitutional if enacted. So they had a new governor who didn't care about the rule of law here or the Constitution, didn't care about Jerry Brown's quite correct analysis, and as part of this crazed zeal to target President Trump, they were willing to take steps to keep him off the ballot and deny millions of Californians the right to vote. And that was the essence of Judicial Watch's challenge. Our voters have a right to vote for candidates of their choice, and that vote can't be unfairly infringed by a outlaw requirement that California has initiated to keep specifically President Trump off the ballot. The Constitution has a specific requirement, or sets out the requirements for a presidential candidate, and I'm gonna read what those requirements are, because I think I quoted it from memory last time and got it wrong. I'm not as smart as I look. Or don't look, depending on your point of view. U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, Clause 5, known as the Qualifications Clause. No person, except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution, shall be eligible to the office of the President. No person, except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, shall be eligible to the office of the President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. That's the Qualifications Clause. very limited. Essentially, you have to be a citizen, naturally born, and a resident of the United States for 14 years previous, and or at least 14 years total, and be 35. So it's a pretty broad qualification in the sense that millions of Americans can run. You can't have a state come in and say, you know what, we're going to add another qualification. What next if California got its way? Physical exams, IQ tests, DNA tests, physical fitness tests? Who knows? Obviously, that can't be the case. And that's why the court was right to knock out from the bench this ruling, this law, or at least preliminarily enjoin it, because what will happen is, unless he did that, it wouldn't. It would require, because of the timing of the California primary next year, I think in November, President Trump would be eliminated from the ballot. But you had the largest state in the union try to keep the President of the United States off his party's presidential ballot, primary ballot. To say that is to condemn the law, isn't it? Now, and of course, our voters, our plaintiffs, the voters, their First Amendment rights would be harmed by having the candidate of their choice, obviously the president, and any other candidate who didn't want to comply with this, be kept off the ballot. That's why the judge intervened and said no. You know, and I read California's opposition's, their opposition to our efforts here, and the president's efforts. Of course, the president has a strong claim here. He would be, unless he vitiated his privacy rights and put his constitutional rights set aside, he wouldn't be on the ballot. The court noted that the Ethics in Government Act, and the president's lawyer made this point, which is a big federal law that really has little to do with ethics and all about hassling people who want to run for office and serve in public and serve in positions of influence in Washington, nevertheless requires candidates to file hundreds of pages of documents stating their finances and such. So they kind of set out federally what ethically is required in terms of financial disclosures for candidates for the presidency. I would suggest that's problematic too constitutionally, but certainly the federal government's already covered this, and that means it's preempted for the states to come in and do it. So whether you call it under preemption, with the constitutional phrase, or it's just outright unconstitutional, no matter how you slice it, this law was lacking and really an abuse of power. Because remember, taxpayers are footing the bill for this defense. You know, Judicial Watch does this work because we're a charity, educational foundation. Our work is devoted to stopping government corruption and abuse, exposing it, educating the American people about the Constitution, as I'm attempting to do here today. And obviously we do it through our litigation. But tax dollars are being wasted as well, because California tax dollars are being wasted to defend this indefensible law. And California's, as I began to say, California was saying in its papers that, but this isn't any harm. All you need to do is comply with the law, and there's no harm. Well, you talk about a circular argument. That was the legal position. You don't have to be a lawyer to know that's bunk. So we don't know what the detail. There'll be a legal, a written ruling, presumably the judge said by the end of the month, on the specifics as why he is off putting forward the preliminary injunction. So he issued the preliminary injunction orally from the bench, and he's going to follow up with a written ruling that details his reasoning. And then obviously the California state government is going to appeal I doubt they'll win, so there'll be further wastes of tax dollars for an indefensible law, and I doubt even the Supreme Court will. If it gets to the Supreme Court, my guess it will be summarily held or summarily handled. All of this craziness to get Trump. And you think the swamp is only here in Washington, D.C.? No, it's in Sacramento, California. And, Republicans, they talk that, they can't win California, so they don't spend a lot of time out there because other than trying to raise money. Judicial Watch doesn't think California is a lost cause in terms of the rule of law and our Constitution and our Republican form of government and protecting our sovereignty in terms of immigration and making sure our elections are free, fair, and clean. We don't just write off entire parts of the country because we're not a political party. We don't have to allocate our resources that way. So Judicial Watch is as active in California, second only to our activity here in Washington, D.C., I would say. We have 2 lawsuits challenging sanctuary policies in California. We filed a lawsuit against Los Angeles County and California, state of California, over its election voter rolls, their voter registration rolls, and that lawsuit led to a settlement that is leading to LA County removing 1.5 million people potentially off the rolls who should not be there because they're probably dead or moved away. So 3 major lawsuits in addition to this 4th one on trying to overturn this unconstitutional requirement. And I don't think I talked about this on our update, but they've got this another law requiring essentially imposing a quota on corporate boards of directors to have women on the boards of directors. I mean, completely unconstitutional. And Judicial Watch is also challenging that. So we haven't forgotten you out there in California because the rule of law is important to, as I say, the largest state in the union. And if the rule of law is not enforced out there, then, oh boy, the whole country is harmed. So we're extremely pleased by this outcome. Judicial Watch was, and this just shows you how extraordinary a group Judicial Watch is. And we had our lawyer in Sacramento arguing against this law to try to keep the President of the United States off the presidential ballot in the year 2020. At the same time, we had lawyers here in Washington, D.C., taking the testimony of a key Clinton email witness. This is all happening on the same day. I'll tell you about the testimony next week. But who else does that type? Who's able to do that type of work on both on both coasts of the country?